Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Tooele Happy Hour with your host, David Weiss and Jared Anderson. Tonight's show, what is graphene? And we have our special guest here. Daisy, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure. I am Daisy. I was born in Brazil. I grew up there, started studying my undergraduate studies there. Grew up from a really small town in the middle of the mountains, so it feels like coming back home now, living in Utah with all the mountains around. And we started my undergraduate at the University of São Paulo. It's a really prestigious university in Brazil. Did a little bit of my undergrad there in industrial and chemical engineering. Came to the US in 2008 to learn English. I came with basically just and after 2 weeks got forced to learn to be able to speak with the family that I was an au pair, and was quite interesting because I literally couldn't get internships in Brazil because I didn't know English. So now being able to not just speak but to teach and be able to communicate was quite a change from there. And after since January 2008, I have been not just learning English. I went back to finish my degree here. I studied at UIC in Chicago for my undergrad and my grad school. The part of my grad school also in Bordeaux in France, so I can share a little bit more as I'm talking about my research and stuff, and did my postdoc at Brown, and now I moved to Utah. I started at the U in August, and I'm really excited to be here and to start my research group and become a professor, and really feels like a dream come true right now, and I'm really loving the experience and everything. So
you're loving the U of U here in Utah.
I am. I am really loving it. It's been a great environment, a great place to work. Extremely supportive environment. Engineering is not as common to have a welcome place for women. It's actually quite common to have the opposite, especially if you're a woman with an accent, being like from Brazil and all of that. A lot of environment sometimes is not as receptive of that, and I have been supported more than I could ever imagine, and welcome, and people are just so trying to make sure that you are going to succeed, and they're trying to encourage and trying to be welcome and trying to help in many ways, and things that I might not be aware of, they would email me, oh, if you should do this and you should be aware of this, and everybody has been extra supportive and extra nice, and I'm loving it. Really, I've been having an amazing experience there.
Hey, Daisy, let me ask you this. Do you think that, so in the career of chemical engineering, are men threatened by women, do you think? Is that why they kind of act the way they do?
I'm not sure if it is that, or if it is a lot of times just used to what they're accustomed to, right? Like back in the days, you wouldn't see many female professors, right? It used to be pretty much those groups of professors who would always have the same type that they were used to, right? So like, if you go to certain universities, you're going to see that all professors come from a specific institution, or, they're mostly like, and almost, it's not like a club, but it's almost like that, where they are used to or accustomed to that type, and they kind of tend to lean towards that again. And unfortunately, that's still the case in some universities, and it's still the case in some. I feel like the same thing that happens with racism and all those other things around, there's still that everywhere you go. Mm-hmm. And I feel like engineering is not different than that. And I feel like it's been a change in culture. I see now, like, chemical engineering is usually students is about 50% women, and you would barely see women professors back in the days, and now you can see more and more, and they're really trying to open up and change that culture and make sure that the students will have people that they can relate to. And you can see a lot of universities really like including that on that, but it's still not everywhere, and it's still where to find a place that is as supportive and welcome as the U has been. It has been amazing.
Right. And throughout the years, I've seen a flood of females starting to take the seats in STEM courses, chemistry and math and physics and all these things. I think it's great that, hey, look, I'm glad we're starting to get more people into those fields, a diverse peoples, and really, I think the more people that enter those fields, the more opportunities that our society has to find new technologies, new cures, new elements, new ways to do things more efficiently. And women are part of the workforce. Women do have to now step up to the plate and take those positions in science. It's almost expected now. We're promoting it in commercials and other type of literature that we publish out there. We want people to go into STEM, and especially since it was such a male-dominated field, I feel like we're almost like multiplying our capacity to do amazing things by promoting women into that kind of a science and technology field. And I just want to say, I think you're awesome, Daisy, for taking that step in 2008 to come to America, learn English, and just propel yourself into this. Because now, as I know you personally, and I think what you're doing is amazing. And now I want to get into what graphene is and how it's going to change the world.
What is graphene?
Yeah, so just going back on that, I feel like it's just so good for especially the younger generation to see that this is a diverse place where they can feel like they can see somebody that looks like them, and they can feel like, yeah, I should go to that too, and it's something cool and exciting. And I love the idea of like, diversifying, just because it is as if we have more people that think differently, more ideas will come. The research is going to be like open to more ideas, and hopefully the future is going to be even better. But yeah, so graphene. Graphene was rediscovered in 2009, and I say rediscovered because there was a queen of carbon back in the 80s that kind of discovered but wasn't fully known. So like in 2009, one person literally got graphite that you write with just a pencil. He started putting it in a paper, and then after that he figured out that he could try to separate the layers of graphite. So he got a Scotch tape and started putting taking it out literally just from Scotch tape, and start separating the layers. And then he got into a layer where it was just one carbon atom thick. So it's like the thinnest material that you could ever find. And he literally got the Nobel Prize for using a Scotch tape. So
Daisy, do you you grab an atom with a tweezer or something, and how do you do it one layer
with this?
Yeah, so in this case it was like it's stuck to the Scotch tape or the other substrate that he had, right? So he had kind of a slide, and then he was just putting a Scotch tape and taking it out and taking it, and it's stuck to it because it is so thin. Graphene is so thin and so flexible that you cannot hold with your hand. It's going to crumble. It's going to be like, it's so thin you cannot see with your naked eye. So if you get one hair and divided by 1,000 is going to be the thickness of graphene. Mm-hmm. You cannot see with your naked eyes. So you would need a microscope to be able to see. So he literally saw that it was like that with the on the Scotch tape, with microscope and other devices to try to characterize it. But you cannot get with a tweezer, especially since it is so flexible. If you try to touch with a tweezer, it's just going to crumble. And it doesn't stay, it's not it does need kind of a backbone to it. Like if you just want to try to stretch it out, you might be able to, there are some people who are who were doing cool research back then, trying to do like a really long layer of graphene on a chemical vapor deposition. Is a thing that is just goes to really high temperature and you put gas in and creates graphene. And they were able to create a long and large structure, but they had to put a substrate right back into it. Like if you just hold it, if you let it go, it's going to crumble, and then it becomes like how kind of crumble together. So it doesn't really stay in that shape unless you modified a little bit of the surface. If you include some oxygen or some other materials, then that forces start to make it stretchy, and then you can stay a little bit more. But if you have just graphene or graphene oxide, reduced graphene, like other variations of it, it doesn't stay by itself like flat if it is like alone. If you try to touch, it's going to crumble. And I use a little bit of that for one of my researches with cancer before, like you had to have a backbone to it. So it's literally just carbons arranged in a honeycomb kind of lattice. And I'm just going to see if I can just show. I had it here. I don't know why it's not. Yeah. So there are different shapes that they can use, and the three main shapes that we use for graphene would be this one is the one that is done the most research with. This one is just like a thin layer, and a lot of times you need a backbone to it unless you have it in solution or oxidized. And then we have this that would be like the kind of similar to a ball. And this here would be like the kind of nanotubes and things like that, where it's used for different types of applications. But this would be a little bit more stable, but still you would not be able to just get with a tweezer, or you would probably need a backbone or have a solution.
Let me ask,
in my case, yeah.
On those pictures you showed,
Yeah.
how big is that? Is that a close-up of something, or is that a lattice that's one atom big?
Yeah, so graphene, like if you have just this one here, is 0.33 nanometers.
That's small.
Huh.
So extremely small.
And does it automatically form into that geometric configuration?
No, it does not.
How do you control that?
So,
how do you make it form?
So it's all on the synthesis and how you prepare them. So like for me, in my case, I usually use the sheets, but I use the sheets with like oxygen groups in the end. So when I make it, because I'm making a solution. Oh, sorry.
His eyes are going to glaze
so
over.
The sheets with oxygen in it. So then you've got to trap individual oxygen.
So I don't do individually, but yes, I do in the synthesis and I do in bulk. So
I'm so lost. I no, graphene is amazing. Just talk to everyone else. I'm not smart enough to understand this.
Just settle down. You'll get there.
Yes, you are. Yes, you
Walk
are.
him
It's
through
okay.
it. Walk him through it.
So there are three different ways to make graphene. Okay. So the pristine graphene, the best graphene there is right now, is one where we have a copper foil. We heat it up to 1050 C, so extremely high temperature, and we put methane in. So the carbons come and it just separates and aggregates it, and it start become this honeycomb-like. And then once you cool down, it goes to the top of the copper and it stays there. And the sheets is there, and you don't need to do anything. Then we just take the copper out and we use it however we want to use it when we transfer, because then we have that backbone. So this is the best, but it's expensive. We need gas. We need like really high temperatures. There's a lot of that. There's another way to make graphene is in solution. And this is the one that I use because I use 3D printing. So in this form, I just use graphite that we write with. I buy in bulk in powder, and I put a lot of acid and base and other things, and I just break out like, so first I make the graphite smaller, and then after making it smaller, I use acid and some other things to separate the layers. And with that, using bases and other things, I do the oxygen as is doing this reaction. So the sheets will already have the oxygen when they're done. And this make it stable in the solution. So when I have graphene in water, the end of my solution is just water and graphene. Once I purified and do all the centrifugation and do all the cleaning that needs to get done, I'll have a solution with just water and graphene and nothing else. And because of I have these oxygens from the bases and the solution, it becomes really stable, and I can do a lot of different things with that solution. And that's what I mainly use for my research. So does it make a little bit more sense on how you can make graphene now?
It's not like you're going to get a 2x4
Clear
of
as
graphene.
mud. But okay, so what does this graphene that you're making look like?
So let me try to see. So let me see if I can share this. Do you mind allowing me to share the screen and I can try showing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I need to have permission from the Zoom, if you can.
Where do I give that permission? Boy, you are.
If you look on participants, and then you click on more.
Okay.
My name. Does it have a allow share screen or something like that?
Allowed multi-pin, allow record local files, make the host. I'll just
Is there a way? Or make co-host or something like that.
I'll just make you the host. There you go. All right, let's see if it kicks us off now.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to do some.
Oh, look at that.
Sorry.
We got a PowerPoint.
Yes. Okay, I've got to go like this and like this. Okay, so you're showing a graphene video.
Yes.
I am going to expand on this and get it in there. Okay. So go ahead and walk us through what you got here.
So literally like what they're trying to show here is pretty much like just what I mentioned a little bit on how what it is. So it's really just the carbon atoms just rearranged and it really looks like a honeycomb.
So it automatically goes into that shape. It naturally
yeah.
Wow. Now that's awesome.
Yes. So literally like as you were doing the synthesis, it just goes. So you either start with graphite and you separate the layers, or if it's in a gas phase and it goes out together, it just forms into that shape. So it goes as graphene is just naturally because of the forces and things like that and how the carbon connects to each other, it just rearrange in a honeycomb like, and it's extremely useful in many, many different applications. So it is really conductive, really strong, like it doesn't break easily. It's extremely flexible. And that just brings so many different applications.
But wasn't its weakness? It's very brittle.
So when is oxidized and reduced, yes. So in my case, a lot of times after I 3D print out my structures, I do a lot of the drying process and remove out the water from it. And once I do that, it becomes brittle, and it does. So I have right now, part of my research is try to make sure that I can add other materials to my synthesis so I can make it not as brittle in the end. But yeah, so and there are different ways that you can have the graphene. So on here, you barely will be able to see, but there are like tiny bubbles or like little wrinkles on it. So on this glass slide, on top of it, there's a thin layer of graphene.
Hold on, we got to adjust our screen slightly here.
I'm getting the screen pulled in so that we can show this stuff.
Yeah.
because this is about as cool a thing as I can think of, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah.
All right, so break it down for us.
So here there's a glass slide, and on top of this glass slide, there's a thin layer of graphene.
So that shadow is graphene.
Yeah, so on top here, there are like little bubbles and little wrinkles. I don't know if you can see. Oops. And those little wrinkles and bubbles is the layer of graphene that we like. The little bubbles that you can barely see, that is some of the polymer that we put as a backbone as we're transferring the graphene to the glass slide. And the wrinkles is just because it's really hard to do it and make it. This is like as smooth as we can get, but it's still really good quality and really good. And in this case there on the top, what you're seeing is actually a brain tissue that I used for brain cancer detection when I was in Chicago. So like it's literally just one layer of graphene here that's on top of the glass slide. Yes.
That is very thin. I mean, it's so thin it only causes just a shadow.
Yes.
It doesn't even cause like an actual. It doesn't like kill the opacity of the glass. It's just a shadow.
Yes. And if you actually like have the solution, what is quite interesting is because like if you have a bulk material of that, like if you have a huge solution of that, it's quite black. So when I'm 3D printing the graphene and I have it inside of my syringe to 3D print it, is actually, let me see here. This one has it. So when I have it on the 3D printer, this inside of this syringe over here, you can see like there's a black solution here, I hope.
I am going to zoom in on that.
Okay.
All right. So that needle there is 3D printing the graphene right now.
Yes.
You're making it looks like you're making a shape that is rounded rectangle with cylinders in the middle.
Yes, it's kind of hollow cylinders that I'm 3D printing. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
So I was just trying to 3D print hollow cylinders. So I 3D printed some larger structures and smaller, but this is just like, so inside of the syringe, what you see the black there is just graphene solution. And I make, like I mentioned to you before a little bit that I started with graphite and I separate the layers with acid and base and other things and I clean it up. And in the end, I have a solution of just graphene and water. And once I have that solution, I remove most of the water. And graphene acts like a gel, so I can 3D print any shape that I want. So the two ways that I make graphene is either CVD, where you saw on the glass, that really thin layer that is like you can't see, or when it's bulk, becomes this black kind of solution because we're starting from graphite. And in this case, it's oxidized already. So you have graphene oxide here being 3D printed. And it's really cool because of the oxygens and how graphene it is by itself, like the nature of graphene, it is really acts like a gel. So literally I can 3D print in any shape that I want. And I had like some larger structures 3D printed. So here a little bit.
So after you make that gel, I mean, theoretically, down the road in the future, we could find ourselves with, for lack of a better word, 3D printers that are designed to use this stuff, and that could, I mean.
But it oxidizes as soon as it comes out of the 3D printer, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah, so it's already oxidized before I even put it on the 3D printer. So my solution is already like graphene oxide. So I already have the oxygen's radicals inside of the graphene is already oxidized when I started printing. But that's really common, really easy to find. And back then, when I started in 2015, it was extremely expensive to buy. Now you can buy like 10 grams for like $500. And I'm assuming that later on it's going to become even cheaper than that. Because just more, yeah. So is becoming better and more accessible. And even the 3D printers, if you think like when I started, it was so expensive. Now you can get some really cheap 3D printers, and it's easy to get, and people have them at home. So it's really cool to see that too. Like there's a lot. And this 3D printer here too, that I'm printing here, I actually did in France, and at that time, the 3D printer that could 3D print like gels like this was really expensive. So they modified one normal 3D printer. They bought a $700 at the time 3D printer and modified it and made it to print gels. Now you can easily buy for $1,500 a tissue scriber, like what people would use for tissue engineering, for bio-related research. And they do the same thing, and they can, like, you can easily buy a cheaper one. And I'm assuming that later on it's going to become even cheaper to get. So I could see that in the future, maybe people would be able to 3D print graphene at home or other type of 2D nanomaterials.
Well, like say you go to an auto mechanic and he says, oh, this part on your car is bad. So he downloads a program, plugs it into his graphene 3D printer, and prints out the replacement part, water pump or something like that. How, well, compared to the plastic out of a 3D printer right now, how durable is the graphene?
So unfortunately, that's like part of my research. What I want to accomplish in my next like 2 to 3 years is try to see what polymers and what other things that I can mix inside of graphene to make it more like water resistant, more flexible, more durable, because right now it is quite brittle. So when I actually put it in a device to just kind of crash, like this was just a mechanical stress. I was just trying to see how much it could last. It just breaks it. So like after you're going, it breaks, and it's easy to break. It's not as strong as I would like. And part of my research, what I'm hoping to accomplish is to be able to make it a lot more flexible and more like durable too. So because of that, right now it's not as durable, as strong as I would like it to be.
And that's because it oxidizes.
It's not just oxidizing, it's just graphene natures. Like, so because in this state it's oxidized and reduced, but once it's really dry and out of the water, you don't have just the one sheet. In this case, I have many, many sheets all around, and it's all mixed, and I have a lot of voids in between. Mm-hmm. So those voids make it not as strong. So as I'm like crushing it, the voids are just crashing into each other and just like crumble it all, and just becomes like one, like all together kind of stuck. So what I want to do is to be able to make it, even if you have a lot of voids, because, so let me back up a little bit and try to explain the process of like the 3D printing part of what I do. So I make the solution of graphene. It has a lot of water. A lot of times has about 80% is still with just water inside with graphene. So then I 3D print it, and I make the structure, whatever design I want, and then it's still with a lot of water in it. So then I go and put in a lyophilizer, and I dry, and I remove all the water, make it a really cold temperature, remove all the water, and it becomes just the graphene. So that huge structure now has a ton of holes and voids in between now, because I removed 80% of the structure that was there. So you ended up just with that graphene. And what happens is any little thing is just gonna crush, and it not as strong as I would like it to stay on that shape. So it holds by itself. If you don't put pressure, if you don't do anything, it stays there. So I had one device that was like that for almost a year and a half, and nothing happened. Like it would stay there, no problem, will last, will not oxidize much more, it's not reduced much more, it just stays in the shape and stays the properties stays the same. But if you think about, like, say that you want to have at home, or if you want to have outside or anything like this, if you want to put in any different application, people are going to touch it, step on it, or like weather, like, if you think of water or anything like this, then it's going to affect it. So then this way will change a little bit and will crash. And that's what I'm trying to work on. So most of the research that has been done with 3D printing lately, especially with like graphene using the semiconductor, other things, they use really thin layers. So you don't see that much macro structures being 3D printed right now. But I feel like it will be soon, especially now there's a lot of other, what they call 2D nanomaterials. Because graphene is called a 2D because it's so thin that everything happens just in X and Y. It doesn't have the Z direction because it's so thin, everything like conduction, mechanical, electrical, anything you can think is just like X and Y. There is no Z here. And there's like, now there's MOS2 that is a semiconductor. There's boron nitride that is an insulator. There's a lot of MaxSeams. There's so many more materials. And I feel like almost every month we find out a new material that is coming out that is being explored with that. And I feel like once more and more materials are being mixed here, this research is just gonna explode more and more in the different applications and different uses. So it has been, graphene has been exploited a lot, and I think like it's becoming more popularized lately. But there's a lot of other materials that are going to be just as important, as crucial for this new research and new areas that are coming up.
Yeah, it seems like not just the graphene, but the ability to take and make other materials. How do I put this? The ability to take and make other materials 3D printable on the molecular level. I think that's going to be, that's going to change everything. That's where we can start designing materials and extracting what we want out of it.
Yeah. So there's like, I just came from a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there were so many research into semiconducting. So like they were trying to 2D or 3D printing, like really thin semiconductors, and some biosensing. There was really cool like cancer research that was done with different, so they would combine different materials in the 3D printing, and they could try to detect which type of tissue was in there. There's just so many different applications that are coming out now with this 2D nanomaterials. It's really, really, really exciting to see like what the future can hold and can come with that. Yeah.
That it's all above my head, and it is amazing. It really is.
Sometimes it's above mine too, so I get it.
Well, you're
I was looking at, I was in a conference, and there were times that I was just like in awe, and I wasn't sure. I'm like, is it even just above me too? Because there's just so many details on the cancer, especially like that I couldn't, but it's just, I could see like the use of the material, not so much of the bio side of it, but it's just amazing to see how much it's coming out of it.
Now, graphene is made from carbon, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we seem to have there's concern right now that we have been putting too much carbon into our atmosphere, correct? So graphene might be a possible answer for, say not just carbon, but say we have any kind of, or not, I shouldn't say graphene, the ability to isolate atoms and use them in a productive way might be an answer if we start having an excess of most anything.
I think like so there are some research being done now with graphene as a sensor and graphene as membranes and things like that. So like 2 years ago, they 3D printed a little filter kind of to put in a cap of water bottle, So once you actually are drinking water, graphene would filter it.
Yeah,
You know,
because
then
carbon is the best filter. So they making a cap that's a graphene what? Oh, see, how awesome would that be?
Well, I heard they were trying to make space elevators out of this stuff theoretically.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say we make a space elevator would be phenomenal, but a water filter, I mean, that's something that you could produce and give anywhere where they don't have access to clean water. All they have to have is a junky Aquafina bottle.
Yeah, so actually they published that 2 years ago. It's really cool. So they literally just 3D printed a little piece that would go on top of the water bottle. So like, you know, you could go like, you could close the cap normally, and then would just filter it. It doesn't get everything yet, but I feel like we'll be able to get there one day. But there's a lot of things like that where people are using not just to filter, but also to sense it. So there's like one research that was done where I was at Brown that they were trying to detect organic volatile compounds. That's like, so every time you buy a new furniture, there's that smell that comes out of new furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually not healthy and not okay to have. And there's a lot of things like that is not like good for the body that we have at home. So they're trying to create those sensors that you can put in your house so you'd be able to see if you have been exposed to that, or like, you know, if it needs to have remediation or something like that. So they were trying to create the sensors, and the sensor was literally just graphene. They would just concentrate it and put it, and then graphene would be able to kind of stick to graphene. Those gases would stick to graphene. So I couldn't see so much. I think like especially with what you're talking about, I'm assuming you're talking about CO2 and other things like this. I think that would be a little bit harder to separate the carbon just from that. But I could see being a sensor for that and trying to detect or capture it, like, you know, or something like that. Even though I don't see the possibility so easily of like making graphene. But
if they captured it, would they be able to then use it? Because if they use graphene to capture the carbon to make more graphene,
because there's so much more other stuff in the air than CO2. I mean,
yeah,
it's a combination of all sorts of crazy gases and sometimes surprises. So it's not like you can just separate one molecule out of the air that's in front of us. It's going to be a conglomeration.
We separate the molecules now.
Yeah. Okay.
That beer machine behind me uses CO2.
It's pure CO2.
Sure. How do they get it?
Yeah. I don't have the answer to that, but I definitely know that there are a lot of different applications that are coming out, and some are crazy. So, you know, you never know.
I can't wait.
And I tell my students a lot of that, like, there's no crazy idea, because if you would have asked me before I heard that the person got a Nobel Prize to find graphene with a Scotch tape, I would say, like, you know, that's insane. Nobody would win a Nobel Prize with Scotch tape, you know, like
the funnest $1 million ever made.
So there is no crazy idea. You never know where it's going to take you. And you know, like, so I always tell them, like, explore and be like, you know, you have a crazy idea. Don't think it's crazy. Try it out. Let's talk. Let's figure out if it's feasible. Let's try to figure out if we can do it, because you never know what is going to happen. And sometimes a crazy idea may make you win a Nobel Prize. Who knows?
Oh, well, and so you said right now your research is you're trying to find other things that you can add to it to make it stronger, or to maybe change it, make it more flexible, less brittle, everything else. Because I mean, it just sounds like it would make an ideal structure to stick something else to, where you can gel it out of a 3D printer into a skeleton, and then you can add something to the outside.
Yeah, so there are people who have been doing that. So there's tissue engineering right now. So when they're trying to 3D print an organ or something like that, that they put a stem cells, some people are using graphene and some other variation of graphene to differentiate it. So they put they do the modeling, like the design, what they want to try to create with graphene, and kind of fill up with stem cells, and the graphene helps differentiate and format whatever organ they're trying to do. So there are things like that being done, but it's not so much on my field. I'm way more into like one paper that I published in 2020 is just creating a film that would be antibacterial and antiviral. And I want to try to think about like thicker surfaces that would be like having the same application. So I'm trying to 3D print these surfaces now, and I wanted to make it durable and, you know, more flexible and things like that. So I want to try to see what other materials can I mix and to make those surfaces like antiviral and antibacterial that would last a long time. You know, the films, I was able to wash it 20 times and was still active. It was still like killing bacteria and virus after 20 washes. So I want to try to create something like that, but in a much larger scale. The films was extremely thin and extremely like not as strong. We couldn't remove it from the substrate or transfer to another area. So I want to try to create now a 3D printed where you could literally create a surfaces to other parts. So with that, I definitely want to explore more different ways that I can make it more flexible. So like, you know, if you were touching it or if you were like moving too much, it would be able to.
Maybe for doctors with their masks and their gloves would it be something that could be used like that?
Hopefully, yes. I hope to get there one day. It's a little bit far from that right now, but I see that is definitely a possibility. So when I started, there were not many people that had done graphene with antiviral antibacterial, so it's new to that now. So in the way that we use, because we use graphene to trap the substances that were antiviral and antibacterial. So we were using graphene more as a controlling mechanism of like how these molecules would be released. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different than what was used before. But yeah, so yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. And I also want to try to create electronic applications, electronic devices that you can have outside, or solar cells or things like that. I wanted to be able to hold any type of weather or things like that. So I want to try to create more flexible and stronger devices. So I definitely will mix some other things to graphene to try to create that.
There's so much more to do with graphene to make it a usable product. I mean, like right now we're just able to get small clumps of it and it breaks apart. But theoretically, this is going to be some of the strongest stuff on planet Earth, just because it naturally forms into that what's the word? And then the honeycomb structures.
Yeah, well, not just that, but abundance and versatile, where you'll be able to build a skeleton. I mean, well, we've got a few comments asking about it. Okay. Now, some of these comments are earlier, and you have covered them, but Corey says, graphene, the product that's going to do anything to get out of the research lab. Can't wait for mass production of it. He also asked, have they made graphene paste like they have with metal paste? And that's kind of that gel you were talking about would kind of be a graphene paste, correct?
Yes, and there's a company that is using it similar to a spray. So they're trying to make it water resistant, like even to use in a cell phone or something like that. So there's a company that is doing that right now. And there's a couple of other companies that are trying to use in that aspect. So yeah, it's becoming more and more popular. And I feel like really soon people are going to hear more about, because there are some other companies that have been using that, but it hasn't been as exposed, I guess. Like people were not aware that that's what was happening or that's what was going on. And I feel like more and more people are going to hear more and more in the future, like that's actually graphene that they have been using.
Kevin says, supporting you, Kevin Ramirez, supporting you all the way, Daisy. I'm a Chem E student at the U. So sounds like Kevin is is a chemical engineering student there with you at the U. So you guys might run into each other.
Yes.
Or you might already know each other. But yeah, Kevin, jump in. This is fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, now Corey does say, wasn't it invented by rubbing graphite on Scotch tape and putting it on a CD burner, putting it in a CD burner? There was Scotch tape involved. Don't know about the CD burner.
Then he asks, can it stop a bullet better than Kevlar? I think the answer is theoretically yes. Theoretically.
This is a skeletal structure that Daisy's going to invent ways to use however.
I'm looking forward to a space elevator, though.
Well, I mean, if you think about it.
Like NASA has a lot of research with 2D nanomaterials. And when I was applying for a postdoc, I was considering going to one area there because they were using a lot of that. So they're using it to protection around it, right? Because it is water resistant, nothing can pass through it. So it's really protective. There's like things like that. So there was a lot of research going on already that I don't know what is the development now, but this was like 3 years ago. They're also trying to build one laser machine that would be able to do the same thing a normal laser do, but in a much smaller scale. And this laser was going to be built with also like part of MOS2 and graphene and some other 2D nanomaterials that I worked with. So there's so many, like, I believe that they might have already been using something like that, because this has already been, they were talking about this on their like applications. That was 3 years ago. So I'm assuming now they probably already have used that in a lot of different ways on their
Space Force is carrying graphene laser pistols right now. That's what's happening.
Like different applications. So you may not be far, David.
I think it's amazing technology that can, it can build a skeletal structure that you can add stuff to and maybe pull us away a little bit from using oil-based plastics a little bit. I think that would be a movement in the green direction.
Yeah, because graphene, once it becomes like above 300 Celsius, it just becomes a powder pretty much. Like, it just decomposes it. So, it's definitely something that is not as bad for the environment. So we just have to be careful in what we're mixing with or how we use it in different ways, right? Because like if I mix it with a polymer that is not going to be biodegradable or something like that, then there's no point, right? Like I'm not making it better. So it's pretty much like trying to figure out what are good ways that we can try to make it still durable, but it's still like in a way that is also biodegradable and safe for the environment.
I'm glad you decided to make the move to the U.S. in 2008.
Yeah,
I'm glad it has led you to this point to help us solve these science problems of the world. And I hope maybe even this podcast, if it reaches some little girl or little boy out there looking to figure out what to do with their future, STEM sciences. I'm telling you, STEM sciences are where it's at. That's the most productive thing we can do with ourselves, I think. Personally, as intellectual minded people, if someone sees this podcast and is inspired to do what Daisy does in the chemical engineering world in the future, I will say I've made this the most of my life.
Yeah. Hey, Winnie Carvalho says, "Love it." Do you know a Winnie Carvalho?
Yeah, it's actually from Brazil.
Okay, well, they're on here watching right now.
Obrigado para ver meu podcast, Winnie.
I don't know any Portuguese.
I do. It was probably not Portuguese.
I know a little bit of Spanish. Uno cerveza, por favor. The Army sent me to Cuba for 6 months, and that's what I walked away with because I'm a moron that likes beer. But no, this is amazing stuff. I've often wondered. I've heard graphene mentioned a lot. I've looked into it a little bit, but it's it's pretty awesome to know, one, somebody that works on the forefront of it, and to know that they're already trying to work with it in the medical field, which I think is very important. Just finding different applications and things like that. I think that is amazing.
And just adding to what you said, and just like you said, David, like the flexibility of it is just like amazing. It's not just STEM, right? Like I love STEM because literally you can go to any field. Like chemical engineer usually design reactors. I would never imagine that starting I would work with nanomaterials, electric device, cancer, or anything like this. Like, it's so diverse. You can go to so many different areas. Like, it's not because you're studying this field that you're going to go stuck to it. Like science is amazing because it's just so flexible. And the graphene per se, so like when I started my PhD, I was doing polymer printing with graphene, electronic devices, then went from just gel of like electronic devices, creating like, is it flexible or not, changes conductivity, and understand a lot of like how the electronic device is happening with graphene. Then after that, I did cancer detection. So like not at all related to the electronic devices, right? Like those thin materials creating to detect which type of tissue, if it was cancers or not. And after that, I did like trapping different molecules with graphene to try to create this control with like antiviral, antibacterial surfaces, different types of surfaces. So like just me alone, I worked with electronic, I work with biodetection, I work with surfaces, and there's so many more that can go into it. I feel like now even, and if you think of all these different other people that are also doing like different crazy ideas and research of graphene, it's so amazing how flexible and how different it is. Like you're not like you were focused on just this small area and you were just, for example, electronic device or semiconductor. Like, no, it's like this electronic can go in so many different ways, and it's just so amazing to be able to be like, in a way, working with so many different areas and being so flexible in how I can use that is amazing. I love it.
Sounds like it's going to keep you busy for a few years there, Daisy.
Yeah, definitely will.
It is amazing. Help me out with this last name in the comments, Dave. Glarum, is that right? Glarum
Zapata. She says, "I'm proud of you."
Yes.
A little heart emoji.
Oh, thanks.
See, you got a fan club already, Daisy.
Yeah, I think
it's only going to grow from here.
This is awesome stuff. Wow.
Thank you.
Well, you stay in the U of U and do this amazing work and make Utah proud. I'm glad that you've came here, and I'm glad that you're going to be contributing in such a magnificent way.
I'm excited to see what you end up making. Way excited.
Thank you. I'm super excited too, and I hope I can contribute and I can come up with some really cool stuff. So
yeah. Oh man. I'm excited. I am excited. Everyone, Daisy, thank her for her work she's doing and all the awesome stuff she has going on. This is really cool. Could I ask if you have a kind of a breakthrough on making something really cool? Would you let us know?
Sure. Yes, I can definitely. As soon as I get something ready for a publication, I'll let you guys know.
Perfect. Or even when you publish something, let us know so we know to go find it. This is awesome.
Yes, I'll definitely let you know. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit. And yes. If anyone has any questions about chemical engineering or science or anything, reach out. I love talking about it. So
this is awesome. Everyone, thank Daisy.
Thank you, Daisy.
And we will talk to you guys again next week.